On today's episode of the Story Detective, showing your story is something all writers hear, and then come to the conclusion that all writers actually tell, because showing every little action throughout the breadth of a novel is boring. I guarantee that whoever taught you that didn't understand the full extent of showing themselves. It's a much broader subject. Utilizing it correctly can be the difference of having a first-year film student or James Cameron sitting in the director's chair. This video is part of Wordstock 3, and we have a lot of other people from a lot of other channels uploading videos today on the same subject. As the videos go up, I will be collecting them, putting them in a playlist, and putting the playlist in the description box below. If you're ready to have a better understanding of what showing your story really means, then stick around. If asked the difference between showing and telling, most writers would give the common example of, don't say a character is angry, give them an angry action instead. That would be a reasonable way to deal with one aspect of showing. But what about what a character hears, smells, touches, or tastes? How do you pick the right words to evoke those sensations in the mind of a reader? How can learning how to show help you pick the best images for your descriptions? Let's start with a few basics. This is the most obvious, terrible, unforgivable way telling shows up. Son, how's your back feeling today, Dad? Father, not so good. It's a good thing you're the best chiropractor in the county. We've all seen TV shows that do things like this. The real-life equivalent would be like walking up to a friend or relative who manages the local grocery store and telling him that they manage the local grocery store. It's redundant. Usually it's done for budgetary or time constraint reasons, but it makes for terrible, yes, even unforgivable writing, especially if it appears in a novel. One character should never tell another character what they already know. Telling. He was nervous going up the stairs. Undressing in the dark, he slid between the sheets. They still smelled like Deborah. He got out of bed and went back down the stairs to sleep on the couch. It tells the reader how the character feels, what he smells, and flattens every action. If telling does one thing well, it's that the writer hasn't grown very much since high school. It doesn't matter if the story is good. It will never transcend the reader into that vicarious feeling that takes them beyond the details of the page. It's like drinking soda from a fast food restaurant that's been overfilled with ice. It sat for hours, the soda's flat, all the ice is melted and watered it down. Somebody really thirsty might drink it, but the full experience is never going to be delivered. Taking that paragraph that we just looked at, in the beginning of learning how to show, most writers will take those details, turn them all into an action. Let's revisit that paragraph and see what that looks like. He walked slowly up the stairs, pausing at the halfway point. He started forward, stomping his way into the bedroom. He didn't bother to turn on the lights as he flung off his shirt, pants, and socks, stopping at his tighty-whities. He walked to the bed, drew back the covers, and took in a long breath. The sheets still smelled like Deborah's musky sweat. He decided to sleep on the couch. It's more, but is it better? Most of it's still just relating details, and therefore, it's just telling more. It's not really showing much of anything. Even the smell of Deborah's musky sweat isn't particular enough to relate what the character is experiencing. And whatever conflict is going on is all in the character's mind, and not on the page. Simply giving him an angry action isn't enough. We'll get back to that paragraph one final time. But first, let's take a look at some better examples of showing. The first example we're going to look at is from Mystic River by Dennis Lehane. Now, we talked about how Dennis Lehane elevated his writing in a past video, and how he did that with a certain type of imagery, and that comes from a certain type of showing. Grab your favorite beverage, a little cappuccino, and we will read that opening paragraph. When Sean Devine and Jimmy Marcus were kids, their fathers worked together at the Coleman candy plant and carried the stench of warm chocolate back home with them. It became a permanent character in their clothes, the beds they slept in, the vinyl backs of their car seats. Sean's kitchen smelled like a fudgesicle, his bathroom like a Coleman choo-choo bar. By the time they were 11, Sean and Jimmy had developed a hatred of sweets so total that they took their coffee black for the rest of their lives and never ate dessert. Smells permeate things. Smells carry memories. But so do sounds and other sensations, like that song you haven't heard for years and suddenly your mind travels back to the last time you heard it. The place you were, who you were with, it all evokes a sensation. And that sensation becomes very real and very visual in our minds. And if we can evoke that with the reader through sensations like Dennis Lehane just did, it brings about something that pulls us into a reality that we're not part of. It's in their clothing, it's in their kitchen, it's in their car seats, it's everywhere. And we can understand that because you probably knew somebody who worked in a fast food restaurant and brought that smell home that was in their clothes and they just couldn't get it out. It was on their skin. So he's using that in a very different way with a candy factory. Certain types of food might evoke something that happened long ago sitting around the table with your family, or your grandmother's recipes, or something that happened in the kitchen long ago. The way people dress, the particular aspects of their looks, it all evokes something, and it all characterizes both the person wearing the clothing and the person who's observing their clothing, because they both have an opinion. They both have a feeling about appearance and the way they look, the types of clothing, brand names, the cost, or the cheapness of it. Does it look new? Does it look ragged? It reflects who your characters are, and those visuals are a way to show. And yet it brings so much to the character because it expresses their individuality. Our next example comes from Richard Ford's The Sports Writer. It's very short, but what I want you to look for here, that he shows the characters being nervous without actually telling us they're nervous. It's done through the setting, it's done through their dialogue, it's done through the actions. So we get 3 different aspects of a way to show a situation that would normally make people nervous. There's also at the end an image of a smell and the way he portrays that. Ford uses other little tricky ways to have visual things going on in his writing too. The character here, Frank Bascom, is with his wife, and he refers to his wife as X. Not an X like EX because they're no longer together, but just the letter X. And she's referred as that through the entire book. So that's an interesting little bit that shows his character. 6D's light is off, and a bright orange sticker masks the door, saying police investigation, authorized entry only. I turn the key and open the door into darkness. A small green light and tiny numerals, 7:53, shine from the black. I own the very same clock at home. This is very, very unpleasant, X says. I think this man would hate my coming in here. You can go back, I say. A smell is in the room and seems not to belong there. A medical smell from a doctor's office closed for vacation. There's several visuals here in the beginning. The lights being out, the police tape, it all kind of adds an ominous feeling to what's going to happen in that apartment. But going inside, we see those green numerals shining on the clock. And it's the same clock that the main character, Frank, has at home. And that evokes a sensation of familiar objects that we see in other people's homes, but it also sets a connection between Frank and the person that lived there, who is his friend who was recently murdered. It's very subtle, but showing those things that they both own. I mean, this is something that you don't see every writer do. It takes a thoughtful craftsman to show in this way a connection that's made almost subconsciously in the reader's mind, and yet it's there, and it's done very interestingly. And it's that last image, the strongest image in that little bit we just read, that smell, the chemical smell. And the writer doesn't say that it's a chemical smell that smells like a doctor's office, because that would be very ordinary. He says it smells like a doctor's office closed for vacation, which again is an ominous kind of image, but it gives a sense of vacancy, because the apartment where somebody once lived and died, a close friend, has that feeling of vacancy. the smells from the doctor's office that linger even when nobody's there, so do memories and feelings when someone passes. To have all of that in those images is showing in a way that I think is one of its finest qualities, because it's very brief. It's not telling at all. We have a sense of it, a feeling. Even readers who don't understand the craft will have a sense of that vacancy, will have a sense of that connection. If you can show as much in your writing, you can transcend yourself from being average to amazing. The art, and it is an art, of showing images in that manner that mean something much more than a mere action can really, really elevate your writing. The final example, and probably the longest one because it's the better part of a page, is from The Best Revenge by Saul Stein. He has a scene here that captures a lot by using a little. I remember the little Italy of my childhood and the northeast Bronx in images of its people. The imperious shouts of old women dressed in black, the teenagers playing stickball, gesturing with 3 fingers and yelling obscenities at cars that disrupted their game. Though I saw no stickball games in progress, my BMW seemed too conspicuous on the streets narrowed by parked cars on both sides. I drove slowly, noticing the walkers carrying portable radios. That was new, and the stoop-sitters, as of old, looking at my unfamiliar vehicle as if it were a foreign invader. I had almost forgotten about the hierarchy of houses, the tenements from which families hope to move into the attached row houses with their tiny vegetable plots in back, and then the standalone houses, covered with imitation brick siding, except for the largest house, which I recognized as if suddenly coming upon an old enemy, covered with imitation stone siding, set back from the street, surrounded by a wrought iron fence with a gate that used to be locked. I was able to park at the curb directly in front. I reached across to lock the glove compartment and saw 3 teenagers looking at me through the windshield with expressions learned from gangster movies on TV. They expected what from me? A declaration of war? I smiled and waved at them, destroying their poses. I checked to make sure the door lock held. Then, looking over the roof of the car as if it were a battlement offering temporary protection, I took in the house. I remembered the legend that once in the 1920s, someone had been heaved out of a 3rd-story window and had been pierced on one of the spikes of the wrought iron fence. Though he was still alive and screaming for more than an hour, nobody came to get the man off, not even the police. We have an entire neighborhood here that could have been pages of boring description about architecture and the way things look, but instead we're seeing it through the camera of the main character's eyes, and he's seeing it through his memories of the people, both from his past and his present. There's an entire array of quick characterization through little visuals. The kids playing stickball, gesturing with 3 fingers and yelling obscenities at cars as they pass. There's the stoop-sitters, the people carrying portable radios. The expressions of the teenagers that they learned from gangster films on TV is also a bit of quick characterization, without boring you with all those details of architecture and neighborhood history. And it doesn't seem like a flashback, and it doesn't seem like it's history, because it's all done in quick succession with all those little mini images of past and present. Something's always happening. It's visual. It's showing, not telling. And the main image that it builds up to, the legend about the man screaming on the fence, but then the main character, when he gets out, he's keeping his car between him and the house as if it were a battlement. It's protecting him from whoever is occupying that house. But that's all evoked within less than a page. Stein used to say, choose your best images and make it stand for a lot. Make those visuals do double duty or triple duty like he did here. Again, the man spiked on the fence. That image not only gives us a sense of what the main character is feeling, but it also characterizes the occupant of the house. So you kind of get a sense of how showing can characterize, and not just characterize the speaker or the point of view character, but the character that they're speaking to. We haven't even met the man inside the house yet. We have a certain trepidation about meeting him. All of these examples of showing are what Stein used to call a particularity. And when he was an editor, He said he looked for that in all the writers that he took on. How did Stein describe exactly what a particularity is, or how did he define this type of showing? He says it was the precise use of words that made him see an individual, or place, or an action described so concretely that it stood out from similar actions. Excellence and particularity told him he was in the hands of a writer. And he had a favorite example of particularity that he quoted often from his favorite writer, who was Graham Greene. And this comes from the opening of Greene's The Heart of the Matter. Wilson sat on the balcony of the Bedford Hotel with his bald pink knees thrust against the ironwork. If it just said that he had his knees thrust against the ironwork, there would be a certain visual in that. But by saying bald pink knees, it particularizes. It elevates the image from the ordinary to something a bit more extraordinary by simply giving us an observation that a non-writer might see but might not observe. Not with the same kind of detail or freshness anyway. Let's get back to that emotionless paragraph we started out with earlier. There's several things I wanted to try here, and I will point them out after we read it. He paused halfway up the stairs, eye level with the second floor. His gaze traveled across the landing to where the bedroom door hung open. The glow of a nearby streetlight spilled long shadows across the carpet. Did he expect her to be there? Did he want her to be waiting, extending a glimpse of bronze shoulders from beneath the covers? Easing his way up the remaining steps, he entered the bedroom. The bed appeared like a table set for a fancy dinner. The covers pulled up and smoothed flat, the pillows plumped, resting against the headboard like they lived there, just the way she left them. He rarely made the bed himself. Unbuttoning his shirt, he remembered how his heart raced as their hungry hands stripped away clothing, revealing mysteries only previously imagined. Stop it! It was thoughts like that which got him into such a mess. Would she avoid him at work tomorrow? Maybe he should approach her first. And do what? Were apologies due? And if so, by whom? He lost track of how many times the bartender refilled their glasses. All he could think about was kissing her every time the shot glass met her lips. As he pulled down the bed covers, the scent of musk, like tea and cinnamon, wafted over him. He lost track of how long he'd been standing there, breathing in her scent, and listening to cars hushing past on the rain-wet road outside. He was warned, never go for drinks with the boss. In the first paragraph, I wanted to start it out a little bit ominously. The fact that he's pausing on the stairs, the long shadows spilling across the carpet, and then it builds up to what he's worried about. An encounter, possibly a one-night stand. But does he want it to happen again, or is he regretting it? The writing doesn't tell you, but it definitely shows that he's conflicted. In the bedroom, he sees the bed as a table set for a fancy dinner. That could be a sign that he respects her, that he thinks she's kind of fancy, or maybe he's just the kind of guy that sees a woman in a position above him and wants to kind of bring her down to his level. She's made the bed. Does that mean she cares for him? Or is that just her habitual nature? Again, the writing doesn't tell you. It shows you certain facts and it lets the reader put them together. Because if you spell it out for the reader, you're telling. And the reader shouldn't know by now. The reader should be guessing. We get his thoughts about running into her the next day at work and that he's worried. So we know that they work together. We also have his thoughts that they went for drinks and got drunk prior to whatever happened in that room. And then finally, he pulls down the bed covers, and while he's sitting there breathing in her scent, we hear cars rushing by on the rain-wet road. Remember, writers often forget that when they're setting the stage of whatever's going on with their characters, that there's a world outside, and life is going on and things are still happening. Occasionally bringing in that world, even through sounds, adds depth and shows that there's a broader world. And then finally we build up to the point that he was warned never to go for drinks with the boss. It's a better punch to build up to than just going to sleep on the couch, which we had in the initial paragraph, and the fact that he was warned. Who warned him and why? So again, it doesn't tell the reader, but it presents them with questions that will make them go on and hopefully want to read more. Reading this, you begin to smell the story or the plot that's brewing. When you hear that a good writer never tells, this is a large part of it. They know what to withhold from the reader and what to show them that will keep their curiosity burning. I hope this taste of how to show has made you think about your own craft. Do you still think showing is boring? Or is it now making you consider things on a slightly different level? There's a lot of other videos in this series, and I hope that you'll give them all a view and give them all a like and a subscribe. This is your community, and we get out of a community what we put into the community. So until next time, keep those keyboards clacking.